So today I'm going to present you our paper named Comparative Analysis of Normalization Techniques in Convolutional Neural Networks for Leaf Counting in Arabidopsis thaliana. My name is Zorana Stak. I'm coming from University of East Sarajevo. This paper is done with my master thesis mentor Marko Mišić from University of Belgrade. So what was the main objective and what we actually wanted to do with this paper? We wanted to see how different normalization techniques affect generalization and performance of the model of convolutional neural network, specifically for the task of counting leaves, and specifically in the plant Arabidopsis thaliana. Arabidopsis thaliana plant in agriculture and in plant biology is something like a white mouse in medicine studies. So here you can see an image representing convolutional neural network. And while convolutional neural network has many layers, in theory, they're not too complex. Convolution, pooling, flattening, fully connected layers, and then softmax, some other activation functions. But also when you stack a lot of them together, you can get some really pretty interesting things. Convolutional neural networks are used for self-driving cars and some other things that are specifically used in computer vision. So for normalization types, specifically for convolutional neural network, we have one of the most used are batch layer and instance normalization. And on the next slide, you're going to see what's the difference between these. But recently, in the last maybe 5 years, people began talking about switchable normalization. And the idea behind switchable normalization is actually to say, I'm not going to use the same normalization in all of the layers in my neural network, but I will allow neural network to learn to decide what is the best normalization type to use in that layer. So on to the different normalizations. Here, I think this is the best picture that actually shows the difference between different normalizations. This shows different normalization methods and their domains of operation, representing a 4D tensor. Here we have 3D cube because it's hard for us to show 4D stuff in our 3D world, but N is the number of samples, C represents channels, and then the third dimension represents the height and the width of the image that is being used as an input to different layers in convolutional neural networks. Here we also see a formula that is shared between different normalization types, batch, layer, instance, group, or switchable normalization. We just have a different population. It's the mean and variance from statistics that are calculated on different sample size or population size. So X and X kappa are pixel values before and after normalization. And here we have mean and variance, and gamma and beta are something called scale and shift parameters that are really important for us in normalization. And epsilon is just a small constant so that we don't get in a situation to divide by 0. So the data set that was used for this is of a plant Arabidopsis thaliana, and it is used in different challenges from 2017, where people were tasked on finding the best, designing the architecture of the best convolutional neural networks, or maybe some other types of neural networks to have the best performance in counting leaves. And also there is one version of data segmenting plants. So here you can see the names of the folders, A1, A2, A4. You can see the number of images in each of those folders, as well as the sizes of these images. So for convolutional neural network, what did we use? I've extensively worked on this in my master paper, in my master thesis paper, and there we developed modified ResNet that, among the others, I also worked on three other convolutional neural networks, and this one showed the best results. So now we adjusted it. We wrote a code for switchable normalization. We implemented switchable normalization. And here, for example, you can see this yellow, pale yellow layer that is normalization. Before that was batch normalization. Now we have 4 different versions. We have layer normalization, batch normalization, instance normalization, and then switchable normalization. So basically, we had 4 different convolutional neural networks based on what was used as the normalization. Also for ResNet model, this is a really popular model in deep learning. It also has something called convolutional blocks and identity blocks, and you can see them on the right side. And also you can see how many normalization convolution and identity block has. For example, for convolution block, we have 4 normalizations, and for identity block, we have 3 normalizations. And here you can see identity blocks are in the blue and convolutional blocks are in this red color, dark red color. So each of these 4 different models or model versions is trained and tested with batch sizes of 2, 4, 8, 16, and 24, because these batch sizes can sometimes influence performances of the network greatly. And also with the number of epochs ranging from 10 to 100 with step 10. So we trained everything, for example, batch size 16, we used instance, layer, batch normalization, and switchable normalization. And then we said, okay, calculated the performances of the network, the accuracy, the mean squared error, and also difference in count and absolute difference in count for epoch, after 10 epochs, after 20, 30, and so on, up to 100 epochs. And the results, I think it would be really interesting to see the time needed for training, because we were discussing before we implemented, and as we were implementing, is switchable normalization, because in the background, switchable normalization needs to calculate all the mean and variance for batch, instance, and layer normalization, and then we use something like linear combination of those. Will switchable normalization take much more time to run than batch, instance, or layer normalization on its own? Here we can see the training time needed rounded to the nearest second. Practically everything runs under 20 minutes, almost everything, maybe a little bit under 25 minutes, definitely, which is not, and we see some differences, but they're not that significant. They're pretty low. So maybe on a larger data set or on even more complex neural network, there would be more significant differences. But again, this is pretty much all in some same range. So now to the results. What was the accuracy? So here for leaf counting, we have a really specific situation, because even when neural network is wrong, when we see a picture and it has 10 leaves, neural network can be right, can predict 10 leaves, but also it can be wrong. But it can say, I see 11 leaves and I see 20 leaves. But there's a difference. If it says 11 leaves, that's a smaller mistake. And if it says like 20 leaves, double the number of leaves, then that's a bigger mistake. So maybe in this, In this case, accuracy as just like the percentage of right predictions where neural network was able to say, okay, I see exactly 10 leaves where the ground truth is 10. Maybe it's not enough to get a real feeling of the neural network. That's why we use mean squared error. And we also use difference in count and absolute difference in count, which are pretty standard metrics for this case, for this kind of problem. And here we can see accuracy, for example, for switchable network. We see that maybe in the first 50 epochs, switchable network, the neural network with switchable normalization has the best accuracy. But in later stages, here, it's dropping. So maybe for a future work, it would be interesting to actually see what is going on here and why is the accuracy dropping in the later stages. We can also see for upward trend, probably upward trend for batch instance and layer normalization. For the mean squared error, in the first few epochs that we observed, 10, 20, a little bit, well, 10, 20 mostly, and maybe 30, we see some big values. And here, as closer to zero, the better. The closer to zero, the better. But we see after, for example, all the 4 version of neural networks after 100 epochs, they have a pretty low mean squared error. And here in the next slide, we can see what are the best convolutional neural networks. And again, it's hard to decide what is the best convolutional neural network and what is the best normalization to use only based on one metric, maybe accuracy or MSE, because maybe the best would be to combine these somehow. But accuracy obtained on the test set for top 5 normalization techniques and batch sizes is shown on the left. And here we can see that instance layer and switchable normalization, neural networks using these show the best accuracy. Everything is above 40%. And we also can see the batch sizes that are connected to these normalization techniques. And on the right side, we can see what are the top 5 combinations of normalization techniques and batch sizes in case when we look at the mean squared error. We can also see that mean squared error is below 1.3 for all of these 5. And here we can see that the best one are switchable instance and layer normalization. Somewhat similar to what accuracy showed us, but again, you can see that, for example, batch sizes are different, a little bit more different than what we saw in the table on the left when we looked only at the accuracy. So what would be our conclusion? Conclusion would be that new normalization techniques can lead to more robust and stable machine learning models that show better generalization. And maybe this paper, the greatest contribution of this paper would be to actually open people to using different normalization techniques, and just keep in mind, okay, I'm not gonna use by default batch normalization or layer or instance normalization in some neural network, but to try it out, to add one more variable in the architecture and design of neural network. Also, our results suggest that among the best models are those using instance layer or switchable normalization, actually placing themselves in front of batch normalization. And our future work would include training the same models on a larger data set to account for differences in plant structure and leaves changing over time. Because even on this simple plant, Arabidopsis thaliana, we have so many things going on as the plant grows. You probably saw on a data set slide, we have some really small plants, and then the leaves are in one kind of shape, and then as the plant grows, leaves change drastically, especially when they start rotting and getting older and older. And we would also wanted to try out different models of neural networks to see how they compare with each other on the task of leaf counting. Maybe use some other neural networks, not only ResNet. So thank you. That would be it from me.